My name is Gary Oldenkamp from Oldies Custom Composites. We're making an instructional video to teach you how to install exhaust pipe cutouts in our fender overlays. Our fender overlays do not come with exhaust pipe cutouts. Due to the wide variety of different pipe diameters, both from the stock OEM pipes and the aftermarket pipes, it's impossible for us to pre-install the cutout and have the correct diameter to match your pipes. So this video will teach you how. I have here a fender overlay meant to fit a 2007 Road Glide. I've already mocked it up, and with a Sharpie I've got my mark out lines here on the surface where I want to do my cutout. In this video, not only will we cut out the cutout, we will build a side flange back on using fiberglass like you see on the side here to make a professional, clean, finished look. Now I'm going to go over a list of materials and equipment you're going to need to make your cutouts in your fender. First, you're going to need to go to Napa Pet Boys or any automotive store that sells automotive quality paint. And what they're going to have is called glazing putty. They're going to have several different kinds. They're going to have an air dry kind, and they're going to have a two component, which I have here. Comes with a small tube, a big tube, and it's from the polyester family. And that's important because that's the base resin the fender's made from. We want the molecules of the putty to bind with the fender. So again, it's important you get with a polyester two-component glazing compound. Next, you're going to need 3 wax cups. And it's important that they're wax cups for the fact that the resin will not stick to them. McDonald's, Burger King is probably your best source of a wax cup. Any medium drink you get there is going to have a regular old wax cup. Get 3 of them. You'll need 3 of them to complete this process. From the auto supply store, you're also going to need a primer. And it's important that it's going to be an automotive quality primer, and it's also important that it's a sandable primer. Just a one-coat non-sandable primer is not going to work for what we're doing here. It's going to have to be a sandable, and you'll see why later it's important that it's sandable. For tools, you're going to need an orbital sander. It's got a round disc, fits in your palm. I have 60 grit sandpaper in here. 60 to 80 grit sandpaper would be great. Any Lowe's, Home Depot, even Walmart's going to have this, and you don't need this super high-end, $100 one. $25 one will fine. It'll easily complete this project. Same with the jigsaw. We're going to need a jigsaw, normally meant for cutting wood. You can buy metal cutting blades to fit the jigsaw. I have a metal cutting blade here, and it's about 14 teeth per inch. A wood cutting blade is not going to work. It's going to dull out real fast, and you're not going to be able to complete the cuts, and it's going to leave a bad frayed edge. So again, it's important you get a metal cutting blade of 14 teeth per inch. You're going to need a regular hot melt glue gun, scissors, a 2-inch wide paintbrush, a couple stir sticks. Now, to build the flange back on the fender after we cut it out, you're going to need a fiberglass repair kit. This is available on our website. There's a couple different sizes. For this job, you're probably going to need the larger quart size. It includes resin, the fiberglass matting, and also the catalyzing agent for the resin. Again, this is a 2-component as well. One more thing before I cut. You're going to need to hold the fender very rigid. The jigsaw is going to want to make it vibrate when you cut, and it could cause you to go out of the line. And in fact, if you have extra help, let them hold the fender here and here. The more rigid you can make it while you're cutting, the better. Just do your best to cut down the center of the line. If you get out of the line slightly, don't worry, we can clean it up with the palm sander. If you would get way out of the line and make a mistake, we can build it back up when we install our flange. Okay, now we're going to take our palm sander and clean up the edges a little bit. Next, we're going to cut up a wax paper cup and use it as a template that we're going to glue in our cutout to act as a mold to build the flange like you see here back along our cutout to make a professional looking edge. So let's start. Let's just take the cup. We're going to cut it in half right now in the center. Okay, then rip the bottom out. Okay, now take your scissors and let's cut the bottom edge off. Then let's cut the top bead off. Now with any luck we'll have enough material here to do both sides. I think we do. I'm going to cut it in half right down the middle again. Now, this is longer than we need. We want to, when you glue it in place, you can have the paper stick past about a finger's width here, about a finger's width here. Now, two things are important when you glue this in place. Don't glue the edge of the cutout because we want resin to get down in there and bind in with the original fender. So we're only going to glue on top of the fender. We're going to make a tack here of hot glue. We're going to make a tack down here. And we're going to make sure that the paper is touching the cutout all the way along. Another important thing is we need enough paper sticking past the top of the fender here to have a surface to glue to. We need enough paper sticking past here to have a flange for the resin to build up against to rebuild our flange on our cutout. So what I'm going to do, I'm holding the paper in place. I've got paper hanging past the top and the bottom, and I'm going to tack a spot right here at the very top, and I'm going to tack a small spot right here at the very bottom. And I'm just going to hold it and wait for the glue to dry, and then I'm going to make sure I have no gap between the paper and the cutout all the way along. After this glue dries, then I'm going to come back and glue it all the way along. It's important to glue it all the way along so the resin does not drip through from the other side when we build the flange on. In the meantime, I've finished gluing on our wax strips. I have glued them only on the outside of the fender. Don't glue on the inside of the fender. That's going to get in the way of us putting the resin in. I've secured the fender upside down here, and I clamped it to a bar on the wall so that it's solid, stays put, doesn't want to tip over on me. Okay, now to build up this flange, we're going to need our resin and our fiberglass. I'm going to cut up strips of fiberglass first. You want to do that first. Once you have the resin mixed up, you have a limited amount of time you can work. So I'm going to cut up about 1.5 to 2 inch wide strips of fiberglass. And need quite a few of them. Takes more than you think. I'm just going to do 4 here to get us going. Okay, now we have to mix up our resin. You have resin and you have your catalyzer. We're going to take about 1.5 cups to 2 cups of resin, and you're going to need about 1 to 1.5 teaspoons of catalyst. The warmer it is outside or in the room you're working, the faster the catalyst is going to kick the resin off and make it cure. The colder it is, the slower it's going to react. So on a cold day, let's go with the 1.5 teaspoons. On a hot day, 1 teaspoon. I've been doing this for a long time, so I don't measure anymore. Okay, now I've got my catalyst inside the resin. I'm going to take a stir stick. It's important to not just plain stir. You need to scrape the bottom and the outside edges of the cup so you get a thorough mix. This resin is designed that once it's properly catalyzed, it will change color. If it changes color with streaks, you don't have it mixed good. You need to stir some more. The resin started out pink, and as you can see, it's already starting to turn amberish color. Again, I'm scraping the bottom of the cup and the sidewalls to make sure I get a thorough mix. You can see it's changed more color. It's no longer pink, and it's a dark amber. Okay, we got a good enough mix. Now, you first are going to just wet the area with resin. Don't put your fiberglass in first. First wet the area. So just paint it on like you would paint. Wet both the fender and the wax paper. Okay, what I like to do is take the fiberglass, crease it. It'll take the corner better. Okay, now this is a little longer than we need. To make this fiberglass take this corner here, I'm going to tear it slightly. Or you can cut it. I'm not going to cut it all the way through. I'm just going to make it so it can take the corner. Now if you notice the fiberglass is sticking above the paper flange, that's fine. Okay, we're going to wet it out. Now as the fiberglass soaks up the resin, it'll become more flexible, and it'll lay better and take the corner better. So if it's not doing what you want right away, that's fine, it will. The longer it soaks, the more flexible it'll become. Now what you're going to want to do is take your paint stick, what you can see is little air bubbles down in there, and you're going to want to tuck this down into the corners. If you don't tuck this in the corners good, when we pull our paper flange off, we're going to have all air pockets. So what we're going to do is we're going to push and tuck it in good, especially this corner right here where it's taking this 90-degree corner and then it takes another sharp corner. It's very easy to get air pockets in there. Make sure it's touching the flange here. Make sure it's touching the flange all the way along. I'm going to wet it one more time. The first layer is your most important layer. Your first layer is the layer where you can get your air pockets, and that's the one you have to be the most fussy with. And you can get air pockets in all layers, but it's your first layer that's the most crucial to get with no air pockets. Okay, now take my second layer and crease it. I'm going to about measure where the corner's got to be, and then I'm going to cut it again. If I didn't cut it, it would never want to take that corner. I did cut all the way through, just enough, so that it's still one piece, and I'm going to lay it in there. Doesn't hurt if you get resin on your fingers. You can clean it off with acetone or fingernail polish remover. Any auto supply will have acetone, any drugstore or Walmart will have fingernail polish remover. Wet it out just like you did. Make sure you're getting high up on the flange, because what's going to happen is that resin, gravity is going to want to pull it down. So make sure you wet it good up on the flange. But you got no dry spots. If you can see the white of the fiber, you don't have it wet enough yet. Okay, I'm going to take my stir stick, push it tight in all the corners. I got a lot of air pockets right there. Push all the air pockets out. There's another air pocket. Sometimes what you need to do is squeeze the air pockets, get it up to the edge. Work the air pocket out to the edge where the air can escape. Now, I'm a little bit lacking a fiber right there. Right where it goes up the old flange. So I'm going to cut myself a small piece here. I'm going to make a little 90-degree corner. And I'm going to wet that out. Again, it doesn't matter that it's sticking past, we can trim that off later. You're better off letting a lot stick past, that way you don't get a thin edge. Now you don't want to go too much, because if you get a really high flange, gravity is going to want to tip it over and make it fold in on itself. And then you'll have a giant air pocket, which we don't want. I see a small air pocket there. Work into the edge. Okay, now that was 2 layers. We need 4 layers total. Okay, we're back. I've laid 4 layers up on the left side here. 4 hours have passed, and we're ready to pull the wax paper off. Maybe a little bit of paper that stays behind, that's fine. We can sand that off. Now the next step is going to be, we're going to have to clean this excess glue off that held on the wax paper. That can just be done with any old knife. A lot of it you can maybe just pick it off with your fingernails. But we want to get it out of the way. We need to run a tape edge along here to give us a guideline in order to cut out the flange so it's the original height of the original flange the fender has. Okay, now you can see we've got all the glue cleaned off. We've cleaned off the glue off the top side of the fender from the wax paper flange. Now I have a roll of 3/4 inch wide plain old masking tape. The reason I have 3/4 inch wide is the same width as this flange. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run a piece of tape down this flange and over our cutout. And we're going to use the outside edge, this side edge of that tape, as a guideline for our jigsaw to cut this flange we built on down to the equivalent level of the original flange. So start lining it up exactly with the outside edge of the flange. Go down the curved part of the cutout we made, lining this side up with the inside edge of the fender right here. Now we have a guideline in order to cut by. I'm not going to cut on the tape, I'm going to cut right next to the tape. We want a little bit left that later we can clean up with a palm sander. Okay, here we go, we're ready to cut. Okay, if you see that, I cut within about a 1/16 of an inch of the edge of the tape, leaving enough material yet for us to sand with a palm sander. Now the last cut is going to be the extra resin and fiberglass sticking off the bottom of the fender. I don't need to make a cutout line here. I can just use the actual edge of the fender as my guideline. Here we go. Next step is we're going to take our polyester glazing putty. Comes in like a giant toothpaste tube. We're going to squeeze out an amount probably about the size of a 50-cent piece. Okay, this is a 2-component polyester, so it comes with a catalyzer. Mixing instructions are on the bottle, and you can't hardly go wrong with this stuff. If you copy what I'm doing here, you'll be fine. The ratio is probably about 90% putty to about 10% catalyzer. And you're going to take another stir stick and you're going to stir this until you've got a solid even color with no swirl marks. It's good to stir both directions. Make sure you're scraping the cardboard to pick up the unmixed portion on the bottom of the cardboard. You can see it turns a darker blue. That's how you know when you're getting it mixed good. And when you have no streaks left, you've got it mixed properly. What we're going to do with this, we're going to fill all the small little voids on the flange we built, where we pulled the wax paper off. There's some little low spots and air pockets that we're going to use this putty to fill. Okay, I'm just going to simply take my finger, hit all the big low spots, make sure you fill them to the top. And there's going to be some like pinholes. You might have to scrub over those a couple times, a couple different directions to get it go down into that small pinhole. Now this stuff you probably only got about 2-3 minutes before this stuff is going to set up on you. So you got to be ready to go. That 90-degree corner is not quite filled in, so I'm really going to cake this on to build up that 90-degree corner. Okay, now looking at this, I've got every pinhole and air pocket that I could find filled. Now what I'm going to kind of do is just totally cover the whole area with the rest of it. You're going to want to get it right up at the edge where this flange meets the top side of the fender. Sometimes you can have some little chips there, and you'll need this putty to fill in that little chip. Like I said, this will set up in 2 or 3 minutes. You're going to want to wait about 10 or 15 minutes before you come back and sand it. You can test it, touch it. If it feels hard, it's ready to sand. A good rule of thumb is if you can press your fingernail into it and leave a mark, it's not dry enough yet. You need to let it dry a little further. We'll come back when this is ready to sand. Okay, 15-20 minutes has passed. Our putty's dry. I can't leave a dent in it with my fingernail. I'm going to take my palm sander and I'm going to sand the flat area. Palm sander is not going to work well for the curved area. For that, I'm going to take the disc off the sander and hand sand that part. Then I'm also going to use the disc to slightly round this edge over so we don't have a perfectly square edge. All right, here we go. Okay, we finished sanding. We started with the palm sander with 60 grit sandpaper. I did that in the flat area. For the curved area, I took the sanding disc off, did that by hand. I also rounded our edge over here all the way along and over the edge of this 3/4 inch flange as well. I followed up with 80 grit sandpaper, and then I followed up with 120 grit sandpaper. You can see our spots where we are putty filled in the low spots. And if you look from the back side, you can see we have a perfect flanged edge. Looks like the fender was almost made that way. Now we're ready to put the primer on. We're going to start by just putting one layer on. Light layer. And we're going to let the solvent flash off. You'll do that till you have 3-4 good layers. And as you can see, we have a perfect flange built on. It looks like it was made that way. It'll leave a nice professional edge. And when you complete the other side, you'll have a fender ready to go to paint.